Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Tech Tuesday. I am with Matthew Edgerton. We met at CES. I keep telling people, Matthew, that this is the last one from CES, but there's always one more. So I think this is the last one. There'll probably be still one more. Anyway, Matthew's doing some really interesting stuff with brain health. And so I'm really excited to share this conversation with you. But before we get started, this. Hey guys, Steve Moran here. Matthew, welcome to Tech Tuesday. And I would, let's just start by talking a little bit about who you are and what you're doing, what your passion is.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'm obviously an entrepreneur. I've been in the field for about 15 years. I kind of did both, startups before and worked for big companies. I started Cogensus because I had family members dealing with, cognitive decline related conditions. So Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. And I felt it was a really important thing that we needed to focus on going forward. So built our team and kind of set off from there.
Okay, great. So tell me a little bit about what Cogensus does, how it works.
Yeah, so Cogensus is a digital application that we're building specifically to do three things. Firstly, we use the power of regular conversation to extract indications about one's cognitive health. So that's as simple as a conversation that we're having right here. From that, we can actually extract how you're doing from a cognitive perspective. So how you speak, how you think, moods, all those different things. And if you're at risk for certain conditions. And then what we do with those conversations that we take is we also give families and older adults the ability to encapsulate those into digital memoirs. So what that means is a picture, video, or textual, think very advanced story or journal of your life. And that gets shared within your family. So it's a platform to help people in those areas.
Okay, so I'm almost a little scary. We should have set this up better. Maybe we could actually take one of my conversations and run it through the tool. And although it sounds a little scary,
it's
you
not.
run into that as a problem?
No. So it's actually the opposite of scary. So I had a fairly robust time in AI. Before starting Cogensus, I actually ran a global business unit focused on AI at a big consulting company. And one of the things I noticed about people using AI in a lot of applications is they were using it to remove people from the equation. So remove human interaction. So our tool is, think of our AI is more of a enhanced journal activity. So we're not actually looking to remove people. We're looking to better engage you in a more interactive front end, for lack of a better word, right? And then those cognitive insights that we derive, those are shared with licensed medical providers. So it's not, we're not diagnosing you with Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. We're saying, here's how we think this person's doing, up to now a doctor or provider to make that call, right?
Okay, yeah, because to me it sounds a little bit scary. Like I'm afraid that you're going to take this recording of what we're doing here and you're going to run it into your tool, and you're going to look at that and you're going to say, oh man, that guy Steve Moran, he's a basket case.
No. It's none of that. I mean, realistically, the reason we are taking this approach with Cogensus is, this, you've talked to a lot of people in this area, right? Communities and senior care. A lot of cognitive assessments for older adults are very reactive. So our outlook is more proactive. What we're trying to do is actually, as opposed to saying, you've gotten to this point now, it's completely clear that you are in a bad place. We're trying to give you and your providers the ability to better manage that natural process, right? So it's the opposite of necessarily going, Steve's insane. That's not
okay. Great. So I'm actually really intrigued by this. So you probably don't know this, but my viewers, my readers know this. I've got my 92-year-old stepfather living with us, and he's got significant, measurable cognitive decline.
Sure.
And so maybe 9 months ago, we took him to a neurologist to do some diagnostic work. And it was really fascinating to watch the conversation, some of the conversation he had in private, but so I was there for some of it. And one of the things that the neurologist asked was, are you struggling with your memory? And it's like, no, everything is fine. And when it wasn't. And
Right.
so I really like this idea of being able to look at conversation and be able to have better insights, because I know that what we experience with the physician is actually very common.
It is probably the most common. And one of the things it's very common, this is why it's so hard, is that even people with pretty significant cognitive decline tend to rally for short periods of time, right? So if they go outside their normal circumstance, say going to see a neurologist for the first time, they might be more cogent in that interaction than they are, on a day-to-day basis. So our view of this process is that all those snippets throughout the day, 30 seconds to 2 minutes here or there, that's where there's really rich, truer data than some of these measures that exist today. Like the thing you said, right? Just real quick, how's your memory doing? Well, if your memory's not doing well, it's a loaded question. You can't answer it accurately, but that's the tools that they have set today. So we're trying to build something better.
That is so cool, because I one of the other things, it's probably one of the most interesting, sometimes hardest lessons I've learned walking through this with him is that a friend will call him up on the phone, and they'll have, in his case, they'll have conversation about stocks and football and politics.
Sure.
And then afterwards, they'll call me up and they say, I don't know what you're talking about. He seems fine.
Right.
And it's even worse than that, because he can even go out to have dinner with somebody for an hour. And I would say that in the last 3 months, he's declined enough where people are seeing it. But for a year, people would kind of come to me and say, I just think you got this wrong. They wouldn't normally be that direct, but I could tell.
Yeah, and it's so common. I had a family member who suffered advanced early Alzheimer's in her early 60s, and none of us knew until the very end, because it was so sheltered, right? We only saw her at I call it holiday parties and things of that nature. You legitimately can't track it because we're not licensed providers, right? We're not looking for it. And then past that, humans are really amazing at what we can hide, like intentionally or unintentionally, right? So that's one of the primary reasons we think Cogensus is going to be very revolutionary, because our assessment is something along the lines of, if you have 2 to 5 minute conversations with the tool throughout the week, we can form that snapshot, and then over time we can watch it, right?
Okay, can I take a weird tangent for just a second?
Sure.
So maybe you should be selling this to police departments to detect DUIs, right? Because you think about that, how people, they get stopped, or even just in a party, and somebody who's obviously had too much to drink, and how hard they work to cover, right? I don't know whether it would work for that or not. It sort of struck me.
I mean, it's an interesting idea. I will tell you, probably one of the reasons we wouldn't necessarily want to go that way is because something like that, where it has extremely severe consequences, you can't have like kind of a longer term validation process, right? Yeah. One of the things we do is specifically, we are not a medical device, right? We are not diagnosing a condition, treating, mitigating, blah, blah, blah. What we are doing is we are capturing these insights and distilling them into a format that a provider would be familiar with, right? So what we did is we looked at all the clinical validation measures that they use today, and we've extracted some of the fields, for lack of a better word, right? So they can look at it and go, oh, I see A, B, C, and D. I would traditionally know blank, right? It wouldn't necessarily work for a DUI thing, because while police are doing their best guess, that is a very, it gets prone to misuse if you do that not so good. So,
well, it's sort of the same thing with the field sobriety, where they walk the lines right. It would only be a screening thing. But anyway, okay. So I want to talk a little bit about how the tool actually works. Sure. If I were using it with my stepfather, what would that be like?
Yeah, so we have it's effectively built to be a mobile native or tablet or desktop, right? Eventually, we're going to look at smart device integration, but it's all vocal with very little tapping, right? Knowing our audience, we kept it as tech simple as possible, right? There's a lot going on the back end, but from a usability perspective, you're just talking to it. So it's as simple as this. Once your profile's set up, you literally just turn the tool on, chat with it. It'll prompt you with some questions. You can have open-ended conversations. If you want, which many people will, they can use it to record a memory, right? Because this memory function of sharing has been very well received with some of our focus groups, right? Like that's probably one of the biggest carrots, so to speak. Like your dad likely has many stories from his childhood that he would like to tell either you or his grandchildren or whomever, right? And you remember these things throughout the day instead of like a 6-hour block, right? He might do something, he might see something and go, hey, you know, I remember that time I had that dog, right? So he could turn on Cogensus and say, hey, I want to say, remember that time I had that dog? And he tells his 30-second story, stopped using it, right? And then from there, he doesn't have to worry about any of the cognitive analytics. That's all off in the ether, right? That's not for him. If he wanted to convert to memory, it's literally a 3-tap process. He just goes, do you want to make a memory? You go, yes. What kind of memory? You know, text, video, or picture. And then the AI translation process handles it from there. And then he gets memory. So,
wow. So we were just, he's got some stuff going on. So we were rearranging his room to put some extra equipment in there. And he had some boxes with old photo albums and things in it, right? Sure. And as I'm looking at this, I'm thinking one of the things that would be really fun to do, because I think it would help his memory, is to sit down with him and just sort of go through these albums. One of the albums that my wife discovered is from pictures when he was a little kid. Sure. But there are no labels or names or anything on them. And we know that oftentimes memory from way back is actually pretty good, and it's the more recent memories that are hard. And so would I just turn on the app and sort of let it run and then have this conversation, or how would that work?
Yeah, so you can do it 2 ways, right? So we have a self-guided and an assisted version. So assisted is effectively you're having a conversation with your dad. It functions as a capturing tool, right? So you guys are both speaking. It will assign a vocal quality to each of you. Say, this is Steve, this is Steve's dad. And then it knows who's saying what, right? From there, you can then extract it through. You can even upload those photos. And then when you start to create those virtualized memories, it will tag those photos and say, this is what Steve's dad looked like as a kid. So if he then tells a story of his childhood, it will use that when it creates its own AI imagery of him. So the reason we did that is, to your point, pictures are far more evocative traditionally than just words, right? So our tool is designed around both an enrichment and also a cognitive stimulation aspect. So that's kind of how it works. And just real quick, if he was using it by himself, he would just talk and there's an AI voice that speaks back to him. And so they could have an active combo.
Right. And so I could even potentially set this up on a tablet, push a button with him, and it would give some prompts and he could have some conversation with it.
Correct. It is designed primarily to be used as a single user tool. So all of our tuning initially on the MVP is designed around someone being able to just one directional, right? But we have, as I mentioned, the multiple versions.
Cool. So, is it possible? Have you done any work with this to create sort of an enterprise or institutional version? And let me explain what I'm thinking. I don't know whether this makes any sense, and maybe you're already doing this, but I'm thinking you could have, and I know you talked about not using smart devices yet, but you got my brain really going about this, right? So I have this vision of a caregiver going into a resident's room and being able to just, record the ambient conversation that takes place and being able to extract information that might help to detect certainly further cognitive declines or other things going on. So actually we have a trial set up for later this year to do exactly that. So we have
something to the tune of about 14 different letters of interest signed to date. And these range across hospitals, senior care communities, memory care, so on and so forth, all the way up to a national insurer. And so there's a variety of scenarios they want to try it in, right? One of the primary ones was base tablets across senior care, different facility types, right? For whether someone wants to use it independently or whether they want to use it for a daily check-in. To your point, right? It has that potentiality.
Yeah, to me, it's really, the opportunity is really exciting. I mean, I know the technology is probably not there, and it just sort of, as I dream about the futures, you could potentially have a smart device sitting on everybody's dining room table, right, and just capturing all this conversation and being able to assign names. I know I use Otter a lot for Zoom meetings and for transcription services, and it does a pretty good job of once they've identified a voice, it can tag my voice probably 95% of the time accurate. And so being able to do that and use that to really better understand and even predict the likelihood of changes in conditions is really exciting stuff.
Yeah, I mean, so the thing is, what we do when someone, so the way we have it built is, it's actually, we only operate on a business to business capacity. So we actually engage directly with the enterprise, and then they give it to their residents or users in this instance, right? So when someone gets onboarded, so to speak, an older person of concern, let's just call them, right? Or just anyone, the main user. They do, we'll call it 20 question setup process. So by the time they're done with that, 15-minute activity, we know their voice, how they say it, the syntax, and the semantics. So that then at any further intervals, we can always identify them specifically. And we use that point in time to then build our consensus, right, about how the progress is going, up or down.
Okay. This is really, so I cannot go out, I could not go out and buy this right now and use it. No.
So the reason for that is because we have quite a few trials set up. From now until later this year. Our general MVP will be available in Q4 of this year. Okay. So what that means, though, is when that happens, the primary model that we're operating with is these enterprises broadly, right? So senior care is obviously a huge target for us, home care, things of that nature, right? They can allocate it to their patient base. So if your dad, for instance, even had a home care worker that stopped by once a week, they could, if they had acquired it, they could then give your dad a license. And then the reason we do that is because, as I mentioned, all those insights that we derive, we have a provider validating that, for lack of a better word. Because if we don't, then we start to get into a realm of potentially calling a condition out, which is not what we're doing. So
God, no, that makes perfect sense. And then is there sort of a separate family portal for just the story collection part of it?
So family members and providers do not actually require a license to use it. They just create their own account and log in. The only license is based on the older adult, who is the primary use point, right? So we build a social graph, because it's all HIPAA compliant, this whole tool, right? So we build a social graph within, and so then the family members can interact with the older adult, and you guys can actually work these memories together. So that's how that works.
Cool. No, I like that. That's really exciting. Can you talk to me a little bit about what's your cost model, what the business model looks like?
Yeah, it's really straightforward. It's a B2B SaaS annual license. We're projecting somewhere in the neighborhood of $225 to $250 a year per license, and that license is per older adult. So if you have 20 older adults of concern, you'd buy 20 licenses. Again, the providers don't get charged anything, nor do the family members. So you could have every family member you wanted logged into your dad's instance if you wanted to. So.
Cool. And so we're too early for me to buy it, which is disappointing, because man, I'm ready to try it out.
I know, we're working on it.
And so you expect end of the year before it actually hits the market?
That is correct. Yeah. We're likely going to be releasing it, all things hopeful, late September, early October.
Man, that's really exciting. So,
Yeah.
what else should I be asking you about it?
So I will tell you, it's an interesting field that we're in. Specifically, which I'm sure a lot of your folks know this, right? Your regular watchers. But the senior care industry broadly is going through a lot of transformations right now. And particularly the cohort of people getting older today are far more tech savvy and have higher expectations upon how they want to live their older years than the silent generation, right? And so because of that, one of the things that we've been seeing is for home care and senior care, they're trying to equally evolve their business models. And those business models, like Cogensus, for instance, we believe there's a very large play in home care because home care is currently locked to a model where there's not enough people to actually support the cohort of people getting older today, right? So,
Right. So, yeah. So I one of the things that I'm still fascinated by, and I haven't quite figured out how I'm thinking about it yet, is I know there are a number of companies that have created AI companion apps, and it sounds like that's sort of what you're doing here, but maybe with a different twist. And I guess I still think human, and there are parts of me that think human interaction is better than the human to human is better than the machine to human. But
I would agree.
But the thing is, I might even be wrong about that. And here's why.
Sure.
I run out with my stepfather, I sort of run out of things to talk about.
Right.
And AI ultimately never gives up, right? So there's always one more question that AI can ask. So maybe it would actually be better than me.
So it's a very nuanced issue to your point, right? So the feel good component of human to human, like when you go home from a party and you hung out with people, if you're an extrovert, let's just say that, right? You feel more energized versus if you had a conversation with a machine. But to your point, when someone's going through the cognitive decline process, a lot of times they get into these loops, right? So I had an instance of somebody early on in our development come to us and say, hey, my dad, his particular quirk, right? He's an older gentleman now. He wakes up every morning and thinks it's an hour later than it is. And in his community, they serve breakfast at 7 o'clock. And he wakes up at 6 and he repeatedly calls them or me until 7 o'clock saying, hey, it's breakfast time, but it's not. So one of the things as simple as this is, to your point, the AI will never tire, right? It will tell him for an hour every day, it's 6:52, it's 7, it'll get there. And then eventually it will be time. But what I will tell you is Cogensus is not an AI companion app, broadly. We are a cognitive analytics and story capture app that makes use of an AI verbal interface. The reason I draw that differentiation is I don't believe that AI companions have as much merit as some other things. I think that function is useful in a broader system, right? And also, I think the barrier, I should say not the barrier, but the return on benefit is much higher if you create systems that better weave real people together versus trying to extract people away from the equation. And so specifically, it's actually in our company mission is to use AI to increase human communication and transparency as opposed to removing it. So there is a difference.
Yeah, so I really like this a lot, and yet at the same time, I also think that the use case where somebody was off for an hour. I was at a community interviewing some residents about a year ago, and I was just wandering through the dining room, and there was this real friendly guy sitting at a table, so I stopped to visit with him a little bit, and he told me this great story about being, I think, in the Korean War. It might have been. I think it was a Korean veteran, not Vietnam, but sort of that era, and it was a great story, and I really liked it a lot. And I went to the staff member I was visiting with, and I said, hey, can I record that? And she said, nah, you can't. Family doesn't want to do it. And then about 2 minutes later, he started telling me the whole story over again. And in that room, in probably 10 minutes, I probably heard the story 6 times, right? And
Sure.
of course, that's really hard for us humans to do. But again, this is where an AI could hear the story 100 times, right? So
Correct.
so I think there are applications where it actually, I think we have to, as you said, we have to be very, very careful about replacing humans. But I think there are times where what AI does really well is repetitive processes, and one of those could be listening.
Yeah, totally. And I will tell you that that was something that actually shaped my idea of this product, which was, as I mentioned early on, I had been seeing a lot of AI proof of concepts, innovations, whatever, in my last role, right, where it was all about getting rid of humans, right? Like, let's get rid of them entirely. We don't need them. And the reality is we see this loop with every new technology, right? Like you saw it with the crypto stuff. You see it with this. It's always going to change the industry, to replace everything. And what you find is it delabors parts of the process, but at the end of the day, there's always a person sitting at the very last seat, right? And so, especially when it comes to caring for someone, right? Like helping somebody age is a very it's a human process, right? Like otherwise, we're just reducing ourselves to bits and bytes. And I don't feel that that's a good thing for generations going forward, because the things we do now are going to echo forward. Right? So if we build technologies that replace people entirely, we're continuously losing our purpose as humans. Like, what is it that I'm supposed to do? Right? How do I relate to my fellow man or woman? Versus if I'm building a tool that makes my life easier and allows me to better care for my mom or dad, for instance, right? I have saved time because now I have a kid, right? And parents that are aging. So myself and you and many others are in the sandwich generation, which is a really hard generation, because we have young children and old parents. And that process, you're getting pulled 2 different ways all the time, plus having to work and live. And it's not easy. So
this is really cool. So we are close to being out of time. I'm sure there are going to be some people who are watching this who are saying, okay, I want to learn more. This could really fit in my community. How do people get in touch? What are the next steps? What might that look like?
Sure. Super easy. Go to cogensus.com and send me an email. There's a form, and we monitor it all the time. We're creating lists for our early trial users. Any kind of feedback we're looking for, like we're generally early days, but we're coming live later this year. So we want to continue to build the wave.
Great. And it would be on a right now mobile app, Apple, Android.
So when we launch it, come September, October, it's going to be available on mobile, tablet, and desktop. So any computer interface you want to use, it works.
Terrific. Matthew, this is cool. This is amazing. I can hardly wait when it rolls out. I'm going to see if I can twist your arm to let me maybe try it at home. If I can, I don't know if that would be successful or not. But this is really, really cool. These are the kinds of, I feel like AI right now, people are using it for writing and lots of things, starting to use it a little bit to analyze data. But I think that the world-changing use of AI is being able to do things like this that are just impossible for the human brains to figure out and process. So I think, figuring out those kinds of things and saving time are the 2 things that are just so powerful. So with that, thank you so much for joining me. This was really cool. This was amazing.
Great. Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Steve. And again, everyone, check us out at cogensus.com. We'd love to hear from you. So that's it.